Okay, in 2003, my book, The Miracle of Death, was published. That book is about the deaths in my family and the dreams, visions, and experiences after the deaths that we had. Since the publication, I've had the opportunity to meet many amazing people, many whose children had died or other loved ones, and who had had experiences, really powerful, profound experiences with those loved ones after their death. And of course, this helped them tremendously in getting through the deaths. Of course, they suffered and missed the people they loved, but they knew that death was not an end. And the grief process actually was a healing process for them because they had this larger knowledge about death. But there were those who would come to me afterwards or would write me or talk to me in any way they could about the fact that they didn't believe that they could ever have those kinds of experiences, that, well, somehow I was different, or those of us who had had those experiences were somehow different. And so I want to respond today to those people, and at simply a basic level, because I think we always have to begin with basics and build a foundation. First of all, if we have that belief that we can't have such experiences, we just must recognize that it's part of the old belief system of a materialistic worldview in which none of that exists. We are born into, all of us alive today have been born into a materialistic worldview in which we were told from the beginning that we were a fluke of nature, that there was no meaning, no purpose to life. We were simply a fluke. And there are so many people who still hold that view, and the energy frequency of that view is still very dominant throughout the Western world, and now that's spreading throughout our planet. But there's also something else that's taking place, and that is that science itself now has moved far beyond that worldview, at least the avant-garde scientists, and they now know that that's not correct. In fact, they say to us, you know that old worldview in which everything is meaningless and there's nothing but matter? Totally false. It is the mind, consciousness itself, which creates the universe, which creates matter. And matter is simply a heavier, lower frequency form of consciousness. And there is a continuum through it all. There is no cut in between. There is a continuum of consciousness from the mind of the universe that creates into the material world, and the material world into that consciousness. So it is perfectly possible. In fact, it is our heritage to experience consciousness, whether it's in matter or not. And scientists are now telling us that. So if we had the belief that we couldn't experience that, we have to just tell ourselves and be completely aware of the fact that we are people who are making the transition from a very deadening worldview. We really could not live with that worldview in any type of truly creative and joyful manner. And that's one reason that we see all that is going on in the world today, that the poverty, the wars, the violence domestically, and poverty, did I say that already? And addictions, the financial situation, it really is born out of this old worldview, so that we have to say to ourselves, there is nothing more important for me to do than to create a conscious relationship with that deeper order of reality, so that I can live my life in a different way. And for every one of us who makes that connection, we make it more possible for others to make it. Because we live in an energy field in which we have slowed down the frequency by our belief system, and this makes it much more difficult to be in touch with a higher frequency conscious world. But together we can do it, and I think we are in the process of doing it. So there are three basic steps, I think, that we have to take. And one is that we acknowledge the world that we are born into, that we know that what has happened is that culturally and therefore physically, we have created a world in which it's more difficult to consciously be in contact with the other world. So we have to be kind to ourselves and know that it may take time. There's a quotation from Rilke, which I love, and I have it in the book, The Miracle of Death, and I always refer back to it because it's just so good to remember it. Rilke says that in the end, this is the only kind of courage that is required of us, the courage to face the strangest, the most mysterious, and the most inexplicable experiences that can meet us. That people in this sense have been cowardly has done infinite harm to life. The experiences that are called visions, the whole so-called world of spirits, death, all these things that are so closely related to us have through our daily defensiveness been so completely eliminated from life that the senses with which we could have grasped them have atrophied. And when we really understand that it's not just we who've been cowardly, it's a whole culture. And we wouldn't even have used that word to describe ourselves because we were so deeply programmed to believe in the material world only, that it was just difficult for us to open ourselves to another one. I know in my own experience that in spite of the fact that I was having these powerful experiences after the death of my son, and my husband was having powerful experiences with them, and there were ways that we could know that, well, we knew, I mean, when you're in that kind of state, you absolutely know it's another form of reality. But there were things that happened in the world that we could actually use as a kind of proof that we were getting information from the other side. But in spite of all of that, I really had to go through a process in which I could gradually dissolve this old programming in me, what I really came to call an addiction to the old worldview. I came to realize that my left brain had been trained to reject anything that it itself didn't come up with. And that's the Western training. It's a fiction of superiority of rational consciousness. Consciously, I didn't believe that for a moment. But what I had to face is that on an unconscious level, I had been programmed by my culture, and programmed so deeply and so profoundly that it was an addiction. When I had these incredible experiences, I knew when I was in the experience that it was real. But when I returned to ordinary consciousness, I feared that it was too incredible to be true. The old programming was that no, only limits are true, not this vast, loving, creative universe. So I think that we have to go through that awareness that this is what we are born into. This is a paralyzing belief system that we are in. And we have to acknowledge that. That's the first step. Acknowledge that we are in this situation, that we need to be patient with ourselves because we do have those senses that we need to pick up that information, but they have atrophied. They've been paralyzed. So we have to kind of treat them gently and give them extreme loving attention. And that means that we would pay close attention to our dreams and visions. We might not have visions in the beginning, that will come later, but we all have these intuitions, these insights. And many people will say, oh, well, I just made that up. I've done that myself. And I think we can't play that game. We have to simply say, I am going to honor whatever comes to me, and I will write it down. I will write my dreams down, and I will honor them and value them. And I will write down my intuitions, my insights. And gradually we will begin to see patterns. And even though these seem to be small steps, they're huge steps. It's just like an addict. The first thing that one has to do as an addict is to recognize the addiction. Recognize the situation you're in. We are in a culture that is constantly, daily reinforcing the old addiction. So we have to try to step away from that and say, I'm going to read the scientists who know differently. I'm going to read or listen or have access to those people, those credible millions of people all around the world who have experienced through near death or spontaneous experiences the other world in such powerful forms that their lives were transformed. I'm going to really pay attention to those people, because we've got to do a lot of that to counteract this deadening, pulling backward force of the culture. We do that. That's the second step. We acknowledge it, the situation we're in. We really make ourselves have access to scientists and people who've experienced the other world, who confirm that other world. And then the third step is that we take note of our own dreams. We start honoring ourselves. We start paying attention to the life that is creating us and that we are co-creating with to create a unique individual. And then the fourth step is that we have the courage to really honor it and love it enough that we tell it, that we can tell our story to those that you want to. But when we tell our story, there's in heart patients, for example, it is known that when people start telling their own stories, they begin to be healed. They begin to heal. The whole immune system begins to be activated. So we know that telling our own story means we honor it enough to share it, and that we tell it, and that we love it, and that we're going to give it the attention that it needs. These may seem like small steps. We know that there are many techniques for experiencing the other world. Some are very powerful. There are many shamanic techniques being taught today, meditative techniques, and some of the shamanic, of course, are the drumming, the light, the dancing, or sacred medicine. Many of these are powerful techniques, but basically we need to dissolve our addiction to this old worldview, make ourselves conscious of the new worldview that's coming into being, and honor that world as it's being born in us.